Earlier today, the chief public servant of the government, Martin Parkinson, the head of Prime Minister and Cabinet, released information to say that he believes that Julie Bishop and Christopher Pyne, who have been subject to some debate in recent weeks over jobs they have taken in their post-political lives, he believes that they are meeting the very broad standards of the Ministerial Code of Conduct. Now, I have to say, I know this document quite intimately. You can drive a truck through it. So I take that as not much comfort for taxpayers that things are meeting the probity standards that you perhaps might expect. In any event, the Senate also was dubious as to the claims by Martin Parkinson, and this afternoon they have instituted a formal inquiry into whether there has been a breach of the Prime Minister's standards. There are plenty of other issues we'll talk about tonight with my next guest, Senator for Tasmania, Eric Abetz. But I have to say he's a former head of the government or Senate leader in previous administrations and also held senior portfolios himself. So I'll go to that issue first. We'll get on to other things. Welcome to the show, Eric Abetz.
Peter, always good to be on the program.
Great to have you here. Hey, coming back to Canberra in the middle of the winter, it sort of shakes you up, doesn't it?
It does indeed, and I'm still battling a cold, but I think I got that in Tasmania, in fairness.
All right. I know that the Coalition voted against the referral of these two former MPs to this inquiry. But you've got to understand, Senator Abetz, there is concern when, not that they've taken commercial jobs post their political employ, but they've taken commercial positions that are very closely aligned, in Christopher Pyne's case, directly linked to his job as Defence Minister. In Julie Bishop's case, she's working on the board of an entity that previously has received a lot of DFAT money, foreign affairs money. How do you see this?
On the face of it, I would agree with you that the initial public reaction would be, hey, what's going on here? Mm-hmm. That is why the Prime Minister, I think quite rightly, referred the matter to the head of Prime Minister and Cabinet, Dr Martin Parkinson. He's made a determination which got tabled in the Senate today, and with due respect to my Senate colleagues, them trying to second guess that which was determined by the independent umpire, I think is a bit over the top. But look, they got the numbers in the Senate, so we as a government will need to cooperate with that Senate inquiry, but I'm not sure that it's going to lead to anything other than a bit of grandstanding by a few of my colleagues on the other side of the chamber.
All right, well, you heard me then. If and I regard the rules as fairly loose rules, if two MPs can leave Parliament and take up jobs in direct portfolio areas that only until a few months ago they were running here on behalf of taxpayers, if they pass through Martin Parkinson's assessment of those rules, surely that's an argument that the rules should be tightened.
Well, look, that is one argument. And that is why I said initially, on the face of it, yes, it does appear to be a difficulty for both of those former ministers, but they did give the assurance that they had abided by the Code of Conduct, and I was willing to believe them, and it looks as though Head of Prime Minister and Cabinet also agrees with them that their arrangements are such that they don't breach the Code. Now, whether the Code needs to be changed or not, that is another discussion for another day, but in relation to these two former ministers, I think they've been cleared, and having a Senate inquiry won't be of any benefit. But look, whether people want to tighten those, that Code of Conduct is clearly a valid topic for discussion.
Let's move on to some other issues. Superannuation. A front page of the Australian today, there's noises being made by a number of backbenchers inside the coalition that they think the move from 9.5% to 12% is an issue. It shouldn't happen at this time when there has been such stagnant wage growth. They'd much rather see any increases that employers are able to pay go to people's wages now, not super in the future. Where do you sit on this?
I was interested in my colleagues' comments in relation to that, and I think at first blush I am persuaded by their argument. People are battling cost of living pressures. There is an increased cost of housing, and a lot of people are having difficulty making their household budget meet. So the question then is, do you assist them today or provide something or force them into something from which they might only get a benefit 20, 30 years later. And so I think there is a very good topic for investigation by the government to ensure that in an environment of low wages growth and cost of living pressures, that we do have a serious look at deferring the superannuation increase.
I also remember you were someone that was not really in favour of constant changes to superannuation law. You felt people who made arrangements under one set of laws, they should be honoured all the way through. So, you know, you can understand people are reluctant, I suppose, to keep locking more and more money up when the rules keep changing on superannuation, which is a real argument to have the money now, have the increase now.
Look, agree with you, and I got into some trouble with the former leadership now in relation to our super policies that we took to the 2016 election. I was very concerned about those as to what it did to people's confidence in the super scheme.
I think you're proven right, Eric Abetz, on that and many other things. Farming, I want to talk to an issue that I know is pretty big in Tasmania. The farm invasions, you've borne a brunt of it, your state.
Oh, look, farm invasions when it comes to forestry matters has been a clear example of where people who, in their own self-righteous frame of mind, believe that they're above the law and that they can invade places of employment, or indeed now farms, as we saw in the lead up to the election. And so the federal government promised to introduce legislation, which we now intend to introduce, to ensure that farmers are protected from these people. And look, some of these vegans that want to invade beef farms and piggeries, etc., they really are meatheads, if you'll excuse that expression for vegans. But really, what are they on about? Do they really think that they're above the law? They can't convince people at the ballot box or through the normal processes, so they just think that they're entitled to break fences, release animals from their paddocks, putting them into all sorts of unknown danger. They're a menace to them, to the animals, but also to road users and other people who might come across these animals.
The hypocrisy of these sort of activists, I mean, it's not a surprise. Look at Bob Brown in your own state of Tasmania, lectured and hectored everyone for a good almost 20 years on renewables in this parliament, cut deals with Julia Gillard to spend billions of taxpayers' dollars on renewables, but suddenly when the renewables in his backyard, he doesn't really want it.
And the number one reason? The aesthetics of it. And so everybody else, if Bob Brown and his mates don't have to look at the wind farm, that's okay. But if Bob Brown and his mates have to look at it, then the aesthetics become very important. And look, the Woolnorth wind farm in Tasmania has been responsible for at least 14 wedge-tailed deaths, wedge-tailed eagle deaths. And for an endangered species, you would have thought the Greens might have had an invasion of the wind farm to try to protect these wedge-tailed eagles, but not so. And Bob Brown, of course, very early on in his career, in the early 80s, actually opposed hydro development in favour of a coal-fired power station in Tasmania. So that is how the wheel has turned, and today he's against a wind farm, and he's against the interconnector between the wind farm and the mainland, because it would be exporting energy from Tasmania to the mainland, albeit it would be clean energy. So, yeah, go figure as to the robustness, the integrity, the consistency of the Green approach when it comes to energy. And he's upset that we're exporting the energy. And I simply say to people in Tasmania, if you're concerned about exporting energy, are we concerned about exporting our minerals, our wool, our beef, our wine, our whiskey? Why are we against exports? Isn't that the way you make money, generate wealth and employment?
And the economy in Tasmania is going gangbusters. It was very stagnant for a long time, but you've really absolutely got your mojo back there in Tasmania.
We have indeed.
Eric Abetz, thank you very much for your time tonight.
Thanks a lot, Peter.